My son-in-law thought he could move his parents into my house, but he forgot one thing. The deed still bore my name. So before he could unpack a single box, I sold the place and vanished. He wanted to play games in my home, but he never expected I'd be the one to end the match. You know how people say a house holds memories? Mine held everything. The scent of my late wife's perfume still lingered in the hallway. Her laughter echoed faintly when I passed the kitchen. We built this place together, brick by brick. A 2-story home in a quiet suburban neighborhood, where the mailman still waved and kids rode bikes till sunset. It wasn't fancy, but it was ours. After she passed, the silence got heavy. I filled it with routine morning coffee at 6:30 sharp, mowing the lawn on Saturdays, and calling my daughter Emily every Sunday. She was all I had left that kept the world from feeling empty. When she married Jason, I was happy for her. He seemed polite at first, the kind of man who shook your hand too tightly and smiled just a little too wide. I ignored it. You do that when you want your child to be happy. At first, they visited every other weekend. Emily would bring pies. Jason would talk about his new job at a real estate firm. And I'd pretend I didn't notice the way he looked around the house, like he was measuring something. One afternoon, over coffee, Jason said, "You know, Frank, this place has great bones. You could get a fortune for it." I chuckled. "Not planning to sell anytime soon," he grinned. That salesman's grin. "Just saying, sometimes it's smarter to cash in while the market's high." I brushed it off, but after that, the tone of their visits changed. Jason started coming without Emily. He'd show up unannounced, walking through the rooms, asking about the mortgage, repairs, and insurance. Like he already owned the place. Emily, meanwhile, had started echoing him. "Dad, Jason just thinks you'd be happier not worrying about upkeep. Maybe move in with us?" I'd smile and say, "Sweetheart, this house keeps me alive. I'm not going anywhere." But her voice carried that practiced patience people use when they've already decided something for you. Then, a few weeks later, Jason brought his parents over just to meet me. They wandered the place like tourists in a museum. His mother trailed her fingers along my kitchen counters and said, "Oh, it's so cozy. We could really make this place shine." That word it stuck like a splinter under my skin. That night, I sat alone on the porch with my coffee going cold. The streetlights flickered. Somewhere down the block, a dog barked, and I realized my home, my peace, my last connection to my wife was becoming a target. And Jason? He wasn't just visiting anymore. He was plotting. The next few weeks felt off. Emily's calls became shorter. Jason stopped pretending to be friendly. And one evening, I noticed something strange. A white SUV parked across the street, engine running, lights off. Same spot, same time, for 3 nights in a row. On the 4th night, I walked outside and knocked on the window. It rolled down, and Jason's father, Harold, stared back at me, startled like a thief caught red-handed. He fumbled for an excuse. "Oh, hey, Frank, just passing by. This is a nice neighborhood." I smiled politely and went back inside. But my gut told me everything I needed to know. Something was happening, and they didn't want me to know about it. A few days later, I decided to visit Emily and Jason at their house. No warning, no phone call. I just showed up with a box of homemade muffins, the kind Emily used to love as a kid. Their front door was cracked open. I could hear voices inside. Jason's voice. His parents. And then my daughter's. "Dad's stubborn," Emily said softly. "But once we move him out, he'll adjust." "It's for his own good," Jason chuckled. "He won't have much choice once the papers are signed. He'll think he's signing an insurance update, but it's actually a property transfer. Once it's in my name, we can finally start renovating." My heart dropped into my stomach. I froze in the doorway, hands trembling, that box of muffins suddenly weighing a ton. Harold spoke next. "So when are we moving in?" Jason replied, confident, smug. "End of next month. Once the sale's processed, he'll be in assisted living. And we'll finally have space for everyone." Emily didn't say a word. That silence hurt worse than any lie Jason had ever told. I backed away slowly, quietly closing the door before they noticed me. I sat in my car for a long time, maybe an hour, just staring at my reflection in the windshield. Every emotion hit me at once. Anger, shock, grief. Not just because my son-in-law was stealing my house, but because my daughter was letting him. When I finally drove home, I didn't turn on the lights. The house looked different now, emptier, colder. The walls that once felt alive now whispered with betrayal. That night I didn't sleep. The man who was plotting in my living room wasn't just my son-in-law. He was a thief. And my daughter, my Emily, was his accomplice. The grief was sharp, but it was quickly replaced by something else: resolve. If they wanted my house so badly, they were going to get a fight. The next morning I called a realtor, not just any realtor, but a competitor of Jason's firm. Her name was Brenda. She was sharp, no nonsense, and she hated Jason's company with a passion. I explained the situation, and her eyes lit up. "Frank," she said, "we're not just going to sell your house. We're going to make this a lesson. We put the house on the market as a private, cash-only, quick-close sale. No for sale sign on the lawn. No online listings. Just a quiet whisper to her exclusive list of investors." While Jason was busy forging documents, I was busy signing real ones. We had an offer within 3 days, a young couple, expecting their first child, who fell in love with the place the moment they saw it. 2 weeks later, the day before the closing, I sat on the porch one last time. I'd packed a few boxes. My wife's photos, her favorite books, and the small wooden bird she kept on her knitstand. I left everything else. The furniture, the dishes, the life we had built. It was just stuff. The memories were mine to keep. The next morning, I signed the final papers at the lawyer's office. The money was wired to a new bank account I'd opened in a different state. By noon, I was on a flight to a small coastal town hundreds of miles away, a place where no one knew my name. I turned my phone off and threw the SIM card in the trash at the airport. I can just imagine Jason showing up with his moving truck, his parents right behind him, ready to move into their new home. I can see the confusion on his face when he finds a new family living there. The panic when he realizes the house was sold legally right from under him. The frantic calls to my disconnected number. He tried to take my home, but all he got was a lesson in overconfidence. My new place is small, a little cottage by the sea. I wake up to the sound of waves, not the silence of an empty house. Sometimes I still miss the scent of my wife's perfume in the old hallway. But here, the salty air feels like a new beginning. As for Emily, I left a letter for her with my lawyer, to be delivered a month later. It just said, "A house is built with love, not lies. I hope you find your way back to who you used to be." He wanted to play games, but he forgot the most important rule. Never underestimate the quiet man who has nothing left to lose. He thought he was taking my home, but he just set me free. Thanks for listening to my story. If you enjoyed it, please hit that like button and subscribe for more content. See you in the next one. That night, I pulled the old lockbox out from under my bed. Inside were all the documents. The house deed, insurance, mortgage history. My wife and I had bought it outright years ago. No loans, no hidden clauses, and that's when it hit me. Jason wasn't just manipulative, he was arrogant. He thought I was some naive old man who couldn't even read the fine print. But I built this house with my own hands. I handled every signature, every bill, every inspection. I knew every inch of it better than my own face. So if Jason wanted a house, I'd give him one. Just not this one. Over the next few days, I played dumb. I smiled when Emily visited. I nodded when Jason dropped by to help with the plumbing. I let them think they were winning. But quietly, I was making calls. To my lawyer. To a real estate agent. And to one trusted friend in the next town over, who just happened to manage an estate sale business. Jason thought he was writing me out of my home. He didn't realize I was already writing him out of the story. I woke up the next morning with a fire in my belly. If Jason wanted to play games, I'd show him who built the board. For years, I'd let myself fade into the background. The widowed father, the aging man with too much space and too few visitors, but I hadn't forgotten who I was before life softened me. I built my company from nothing. I knew contracts, I knew money, and I knew exactly how to disappear when I wanted to. That morning, I called Maggie, my lawyer. She was the same woman who handled my wife's estate years ago. Sharp, loyal, and ruthless in the best way. "Maggie," I said, "I need to sell my house quickly and quietly. And I don't want my daughter or her husband to know." There was a short pause. "You're finally done with them, huh?" "Let's just say," I replied, "they're about to get what they've earned." Within 48 hours, Maggie had everything lined up. She found a private buyer, a retired couple looking to move to the suburbs, cash ready, no questions asked. The deal would be cleared in 3 weeks. That gave me just enough time to pack up my memories and stage the perfect illusion. I wanted Jason to believe everything was normal, so I kept smiling. When he visited that weekend, pretending to check the wiring, I offered him coffee and thanked him for his help. He looked uncomfortable. He wasn't used to me being this calm. He probably expected anger or a confrontation. He didn't realize that silence can be the loudest weapon. Later that night, I went into the attic, the place my wife and I used to store our Christmas decorations. I sat down among the boxes and opened one labeled Linda's Things. Her handwriting hit me like a punch to the chest. Inside were old photo albums, her wedding veil, and a bundle of letters tied with a faded ribbon. I pulled one out. It was from the year we bought the house. "Frank, this home will outlive us. Promise me when I'm gone you'll protect it, not just the walls, but what it stands for." I felt my throat tighten. She'd loved this place more than anything, and I wasn't about to let some greedy man use it as a stepping stone. So I began phase 2. Every night for the next week, I cleaned, packed, and sorted, keeping only what truly mattered: family photos, my wife's locket, my old journal. Everything else went to donation centers. The house grew emptier, lighter, like it was shedding its past right along with me. But here's the thing about manipulation. It works best when the other person thinks they're in control. So I played my part perfectly. I left my bank statements in plain sight, accidentally open on the table, showing lowered balances from the money I'd quietly moved to a new account. I complained to Emily about getting tired of maintaining the house and hinted I might downsize soon. Her eyes lit up, exactly as I expected. That evening, she told Jason. 2 days later, he showed up with fake concern written all over his face. "Frank, maybe I can help with the paperwork, insurance, maintenance, whatever you need." I smiled. "That's very kind, son. Let's talk next week." That next week never came. Because the very next morning, the house was sold. Signed, sealed, paid in full. Maggie called to confirm. "It's done," she said. "Congratulations, Frank. You're officially homeless." I laughed for the first time in weeks. "Not homeless," I said. "Just off the radar." That night, I wrote a letter short, sharp, and final. It read, "Emily, I know everything. The conversations, the lies, the papers Jason planned to make me sign. You made your choice. So did I. This house will never belong to him. Or you. When you come looking, I'll be gone. Don't bother finding me. Dad." I left it on the kitchen counter, next to a vase of fresh daisies, her mother's favorite. Then, with one last look around, I locked the front door and walked away. The neighborhood was quiet, the air thick with summer heat. I didn't look back once. I drove for hours, no destination in mind, just roads and silence. Somewhere outside Asheville, I stopped at a small cabin I'd seen online weeks earlier. The owner was an old friend from the construction business. He owed me a favor. By morning, I had the keys in my hand. It was simple, a fireplace, 1 bedroom, surrounded by forest and calm. But it was mine, truly mine. For the first time in years, I felt peace. No expectations, no betrayal, no eyes watching me. Still, I couldn't stop wondering how long it would take before Jason realized the truth that the house he'd been scheming for no longer existed in his future. 3 days later, I got my answer. My phone buzzed nonstop. 12 missed calls from Emily, 4 from Jason, and 1 from an unknown number that had to be Harold. I didn't answer a single one. Instead, I poured myself a drink, stepped out onto the porch, and watched the sunrise wash over the trees. It felt like a new chapter, not revenge yet, but the calm before it. Because I knew Jason, he wouldn't let go that easily. And when he came looking for me, I'd be ready. It had been almost 6 months since I last saw them. 6 months since I'd watched my daughter's car vanish down the gravel road, taking with it the last piece of the life I'd once known. Life in the cabin had become peaceful, almost too quiet at times. I'd grown used to the rhythm of solitude. The morning coffee on the porch, the afternoon walks by the lake, the evenings spent reading by the fireplace. I wasn't lonely, just still. Still enough to hear myself think. Still enough to feel the ache that time doesn't quite erase. Thank you so much for watching. What do you think will happen next? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to like this video and subscribe to see how the story unfolds. See you next time. One rainy evening in late October, my quiet life was interrupted by a knock. I froze. Out here, visitors were rarer than a sunny day in winter. No neighbors, no friends, just me in the woods. But when I opened the door, the world I'd left behind was standing right there on my porch. It was Emily. Her hair was plastered to her cheeks by the rain, and her eyes held a weariness that went bone deep, the kind that comes from regret, not a lack of sleep. "Hi, Dad," she whispered. For a moment, the words just wouldn't come. Then I managed a nod and stepped aside. "Come in." She walked in slowly, her gaze sweeping over the simple cabin. The wood stove, the old photos on the wall, the worn-out chair where I spent most of my days. It wasn't the life she'd chosen, but it was mine. Do you want coffee? I asked, the words a reflex from a life we once shared. She just nodded, clutching her coat like a shield. I handed her the warm mug, and she took it with both hands as if trying to warm her soul, not just her fingers. The silence stretched between us, thick with unspoken words. I didn't know where else to go. She finally broke the quiet. That's usually when people find the right place, I replied, my voice softer than I intended. A small, broken laugh escaped her lips. Jason's gone, she said, her voice flat. He left. Took out loans in my name, drained our accounts. I didn't even know until the bank called. I stayed silent, letting her words hang in the air. This wasn't the time for I told you so. It was time to listen. I tried to fix things, Dad, she continued, her voice trembling. After you sold the house, I thought I could rebuild, make something good out of what we lost. But everything I touched just fell apart. Her voice cracked on the last words. I should have listened to you. I leaned back, studying her face. It was the same face that used to peek over the kitchen counter, begging for one more bedtime story. Listening's easy, I said quietly. Understanding comes later. She set her mug down on the table with a clatter and buried her face in her hands. I hurt you, she sobbed. I let him use you. And when you needed me to stand up for you, I didn't. The weight of her guilt was a palpable thing in the small room. I don't expect forgiveness, she said, looking up at me, her eyes pleading. I just needed you to know that I see it now, all of it. And I'm sorry. The rain outside had softened to a gentle whisper against the windows. The storm inside the cabin was beginning to calm, too. For a long while, we just sat there. Then, I stood up and walked over to the old wooden chest by the fireplace. I reached inside and pulled out a small velvet box. I walked back and handed it to her. What's this? She asked, her voice thick with tears. Your mother's, I said. She wanted you to have it when you were ready. Her fingers trembled as she opened it. Inside lay a delicate silver locket engraved with my initials and her mother's. She gasped. I thought this was lost. I shook my head. No, I just kept it safe. Until you remembered what it meant. She clicked the locket open. Tucked inside was a tiny photo of her at 8 years old, sitting between her mother and me. We were all smiles, a family without a single shadow in sight. The sight of it broke the dam. Tears streamed down her face, washing away years of pain. Dad, she whispered, her voice choked. Before she could even finish her sentence, I pulled her into a hug. For a second, she was stiff, surprised. Then she collapsed against me, sobbing into my shoulder, all the years of distance and anger melting away in that one embrace. It's okay, I whispered, holding her tight. It's over. You're here. That's what matters. When she finally pulled back, her eyes were red but clear, as if the storm had finally passed. I don't have anywhere to go, she said, her voice barely a whisper. I looked at her, my daughter finally home. You do now, I replied. The weeks that followed were slow, quiet, and healing. Emily stayed. We chopped wood, we cooked meals, and we talked for hours, rediscovering the father and daughter we used to be. We were building something new from the ruins of our past. She told me how she'd spent years chasing approval mine, Jason's, even the memory of her mother, and had lost herself in the process. I told her the truth I'd learned in my solitude. We all lose ourselves chasing approval. The trick is learning that peace isn't something someone gives you. It's something you have to build for yourself. Some nights, we just sit in comfortable silence, watching the fire dance. On other nights, I'd hear her laugh again, that bright, genuine sound I hadn't heard in years. And every single time, I felt a piece of my own broken heart heal right along with hers. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey. If this story touched your heart, please consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel for more content like this. It means the world to me. See you next time. One afternoon, a letter arrived. It was an ordinary Tuesday, the kind that usually melts into the next without leaving a trace. But this letter, it was different. It came from the new owners of the house I'd sold, our house. The one I built with my own hands for her, for my wife. The one she filled with laughter and the smell of baking bread. The new owners wrote that they'd been doing some repairs and found something under the floorboards in the master bedroom, an old family photo. It was the three of us, standing on the front porch, the sun in our eyes. My wife, with her arms wrapped around me and our daughter Emily, a perfect moment, frozen in time. The letter was kind, considerate. It ended with words that hit me harder than any accusation ever could. Your home still feels full of love. We'll take good care of it. I handed the letter to Emily. She read it, her shoulders shaking slightly. When she looked up, tears were tracing paths down her cheeks, but she was smiling. A real, genuine smile, the kind I hadn't seen in years. She whispered so quietly I almost missed it. She'd be happy, wouldn't she? All I could do was nod. She would. For so long that house had been a monument to what we lost, a shrine to betrayal. The thought of another family finding joy within those walls, it felt like a release. Like the final page of a very long, very painful chapter had finally been turned. The next day, we drove into town. The air felt lighter, the colors of the world a little brighter. I pulled up to the bank, a place I'd visited in secret every month for years. I walked Emily inside and introduced her to the bank manager, a kind woman who knew my story without ever needing all the details. I showed Emily the trust account I'd opened for her daughter, my granddaughter, who was just 5 years old. Her eyes widened as she looked at the balance on the screen. It was a significant amount, the culmination of years of quiet, steady work. The sum of every painful memory I had converted into a promise for the future. Dad, she said, her voice thick with emotion. This is too much. I shook my head, putting a hand on her shoulder. No, it's not, I said, my own voice steadier than I expected. It's exactly enough. It's for her. She deserves a start in life that doesn't come from broken promises. A start that wasn't weighed down by the mistakes of the past. Emily reached across the desk and took my hand, her grip firm. Her eyes met mine, and in them I saw understanding. You're still teaching me, aren't you? She asked softly. A small smile touched my lips. That's a father's job, I replied. Even when the lesson hurts, and this one had hurt more than anything. But seeing her there, seeing the hope for my granddaughter's future, it was worth every second of the pain. That winter, the snow came early, blanketing our small cabin by the lake in a deep, profound silence. It was a cleansing kind of quiet, muffling the outside world and turning our focus inward. One morning, I woke before dawn, the habit of a lifetime. I poured a cup of coffee and stepped out onto the porch, the cold air sharp against my face. The porch. The same spot where, years ago, on a different porch, this whole journey began. But this time, I wasn't alone in my grief. Emily was already there, wrapped in a thick wool blanket, staring out at the frozen landscape. From inside, I could hear the faint, cheerful sounds of cartoons and the giggles of my granddaughter, safe and warm. Emily looked over at me as I sat down, and she smiled. Not the tearful smile from before, but a peaceful one. You know, she said, her voice a soft cloud in the frosty air. I used to think revenge meant getting even, making him pay. But now I think it just means getting free. I laughed, a soft, low sound that didn't disturb the stillness. You're learning. She leaned her head on my shoulder just like she did when she was a little girl afraid of thunderstorms. We sat in comfortable silence for a moment before she asked, Do you ever miss the old house? I thought about it, really thought about it. The ghost of a memory, the scent of her mother's roses, the feel of the worn wooden floors under my feet. Sometimes I admit it honestly, but the thing about houses, they're just wood and nails. They don't hold the love. People do. We sat there, father and daughter, as the sun began to rise over the frozen lake. Golden light spilled across the snow-covered world, looking for all the world-like forgiveness. And for the first time in what felt like a lifetime, my heart felt light. The heavy anchor of anger, the corrosive bitterness that had defined me for so long. It was gone. There was just peace. A quiet, steady peace. And somewhere, in a place beyond my understanding, I knew my wife would be proud. Not because I'd sold the house or taught anyone a lesson, but because I had finally done the hardest thing of all. I had let go. And in doing so, I'd found my way back to my family. Back to love. Thank you so much for listening to my story. If it resonated with you, I'd be so grateful if you'd like this video and subscribe to the channel. Your support means the world. Thank you.